Okay, so we're just going to finish this little piece here in the Seder Sharm. I don't know if everybody has the text. I'm really hoping. Oh, MZ, let me see you. I haven't seen you in ages. MZ, where's MZ? Hi, MZ. That's my Chicago man. Okay, good. Okay, so I just want to go through the different ideas of food, and then I'm going to go back to the mimer. We don't have that much time. I want to finish this around to a new topic. But here we are in the Seder Sharm. Someone has something open, and I'm listening to the lady and the children in the background. So whoever it is, either mum your mic or mum them, one of the two. Okay, we're good. Okay, so he writes, I'm really hoping that you have this because it was posted, so I'll just say it about that. We were describing the idea of what the food is, that the food that we eat not just nurtures our body, but also actually gives justification for the soul to, so to speak, stop fidgeting and being happy being here in this world. That's what we discussed. It nourishes the soul. We saw this in the Magen Avraham in the Gra. That's the Pshat in the Ramah when it says Roifei Cholbaso Maflila Asot Shemikasher, that it ties up the ruchnis with gashmis, means to say, as the Gra and the Magen Avraham explained, he ties the soul to the body with gashmis, with food. And the Magen Avraham Gra explained that the guf, the body, is nurtured with the gashmis hamaychel, and the neshama is tied to that guf with the ruchnis hamaychel. And we explained what that meant at length. I don't think I have to review that. Let's take it for you. Now we start explaining, if that's the case, what is the different types of nourishment that the Jews had coming out of Egypt. So that's the piece I want to read at the moment. If you have the text, it's nice that somehow I have to say it orally. If not, it's on the right column of this Seder Sharm Erev Yom Kippurim. It's the 8th line from the bottom going up. It says Omnam Bat. Dealing with food, yesh chilukim, there are differences. Not all foods are alike. You can eat the Zohar Kadosh, and quotes the Zohar in Chelik Beis, Peish Hamachalef, and this is what it says over there. Because Misu originally, Kadnafki Yisom Mitzrayim, when the Jews left Egypt, at that stage, Ehalu, they rose Benama with a bread, the Ikra Matzah, which is called Matzah. Vahashta, but now, in other words, the next stage, Zachu, they merited Be'alu, and they rose Lemeichal Nama, to eat an achra, to eat another type of bread, Eloah Yatir, higher leveled, Me'atar Eloah, from a higher source. Ichtiv, as the pasuk says, Hinim Amtir Lechem, I now will pour upon you Lechem Min HaShamayim. It's not just bread that you made with flour and water and made sure it wasn't leavened, but rather it's Lechem Min HaShamayim, bread, nourishment from heaven. Min HaShamayim mamish, the Zohar says it doesn't mean from the skies. Min HaShamayim mamish means, say, from the celestial worlds. That's Min HaShamayim. We don't mean the stratosphere or the atmosphere, etc. Rather, we mean what we call the Metzius of Ruchnis, the sources of reality. Then the Zohar continues. So there's two levels of bread. You can eat, obviously, chametz. You can rise to lechem, which is called matzah. You rise from there to man, min hashamayim, and then finally chavrayu, the friends. Friends are called the chaverim, what we call Gemara chaverim, which are the people who spent their time in limud Torah and hakpada and mitzvahs. At that time, one has to remember that we didn't have a Shulchan Aruch, we didn't have a Rambam, we definitely didn't have a Mishnah Berurah. In order to be a religious Jew, you either had to be unbelievably well versed, because you were expected to write your own Shulchan Aruch. How would, if you were living in some village, what were you going to do? How would you know Hilchos Atmana and Shehiyah unless you knew Perek Kira backwards and forwards? How would you eat meat if you didn't know Hilchos Shechita backwards and forwards? How would you know what to do? Your options were either to be very, very learned, and that's the pasuk in Chumash. Im bechukotai teilechu, it's mitzvotai tishmeiru. What does Rashi say? If you'll be amel b'Torah, you will toil in your learning, thus you will be academically developed, and then you'll be able to keep the mitzvahs. Because at that time in history, if you weren't amel b'Torah, there's no way you could really do the mitzvahs properly. If we look in the Gemara, what do we see? The people who were not very learned, the only thing they could do is connect themselves to a certain, what you call Mora da Asra. The Mora da Asra at the time, the Rav of the time, the learned person of the time, he was the one which would tell them, basically, he knew his Masechta Shabbos, he would tell them how to keep Shabbos. There was no book for anybody to read. It was all Torah Shabbat Peh. So that's why the halacha developed the Asr Damar, halacha Kemar. Yes, if there's a place where there is the major Talmud Chacham, the halacha would be like him. What are you going to do? By default, you people don't know anything. That's how that halacha developed. At that point in time, Mora da Asra was a very important job. Whether this continues, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to usurp the standing of local rabbanim. But whatever it is, it's not what it was meant originally in the times of the Talmud. Okay, there it was very simple. The Mora da Asra had the paskin l'shayla. For example, in America, you had Moshe Feinstein. There's no Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and Agunus, or the different questions of what's the height of a mechitza in the shul. For that, you needed the Mora da Asra, which at the time was Moshe Feinstein. He was the equipped man to be able to pass on the shayla. Those people who know nothing more than you, but they know how to read a Mishnah Berurah, can tell you what the Mishnah Berurah says. They don't have a din of a Mora da Asra as far as that halacha is concerned. I just want you to understand. Mora da Asra means the halachic specialist, which is capable of paskening the shayla from the Shulchan Aruch, or from not from the Shulchan Aruch, but rather from the sugyas, from the Gemara, etc. The Moshe Feinsteins of the world, the Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Yashiv of the world. That was the tzura of the Mora da Asra b'zman haTalmud. It doesn't mean you shouldn't respect your rabbis. You should respect them because they're very special people and they do great things. But that's not the din of Mora Asra Damar halacha Kemar. I mean, that the Gemara means in Masechta Shabbos, just because I happen to live in Har Nov, and the Mora da Asra is of Yosef, what's his name, Rav David Yosef, he's the official Rav. That doesn't mean I have to pass him like him. Just because the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv is Rabbi Shmuel Lau, he's the Mora da Asra official, you don't have to pass him like him. Because again, if I'm in doubt, I don't have to ask him. I can ask a great scholar living somewhere else. Because it's a whole different reality. Therefore, that halacha doesn't apply. Getting back to this. So the idea is, that's why they were called chaverim. Those people who were very much into their learning, therefore were very knowledgeable, they were making the mitzvahs. The Gemara describes what's the opposite of chaverim? Am ha'oretz, the regular people of the land. It doesn't mean ignorant. It means the regular people of the land. They didn't know what to do. And the Gemara describes how people made 100,000, who knows how many mistakes in halacha because they were not very well versed, which makes a lot of sense. I sometimes notice without going into it, you go to different places that thank God that the girls went to the Mechala, so they know that Hanaga is Shia and Atmana, but the men definitely don't. The Shiur Bachim, are you kidding? I don't want to say, when the guys make a chant on Shabbos, Rachmuna Litzlan, I'd rather not discuss it. You know what I mean? Mutu Shoygigim Value Mazidim. You know what I mean? They don't know anything. The girls know because they saw their mothers and they went to Mechala, whatever it is. They were taught what to do practically. It's an interesting thing to notice. So as far as that's concerned, that's chavraya. Chavraya means the people, the ishtadlo b'iraisa. That's what he writes here. Chavraya, the ishtadlo b'iraisa. They're mishtadel into learning. So he says, me'asa achra ilo yatir, from another place, from a higher level, it's zenu, they are nourished. Now, it doesn't mean their body's nourished. It means their soul wants to be tied up to the body, not because of the bread they eat, not even because of matzah, not even if the people, the Talmidei Chachamim in the Midbar was not because of the man, but rather because of what? Mahi, what is this reason that the people of that level, even in the Midbar that were eating man, why did the souls want to stay in the body? The idea of internalizing Chachma b'Kadosh Baruch Hu, this gives life. What does it mean? Not to the body, but rather to the soul to want to stay in the body. He's explaining the name of the Beis Yaakov. Rav Yaakov Leiner of Ishbitza was the son of Mordechai Yosef Leiner, which was the counterpart of Rav Mendel of Kotsk, They were both Talmidim of Simcha Bunim of Fishizcha. At the time after Simcha Bunim passed away, Reb Mendel of Kutz was perceived as the heir, and Reb Yosef, his chavrusa, accepted his rabbanut, and he was one of his chassidim. But when, after X amount of years, when the Kotzker went into total seclusion for like it was 18 years, and very few people could get into him, only Rabbi Yitzchak Verker, his old friend, his son-in-law, the Avnei Nezer, his ex-brother-in-law, the Chud Shiurim. Otherwise, he wouldn't talk to people because he was tired of dealing with the mundane things of life. Here, I'll tell you a story, an anecdote, just to explain this. It's a very beautiful anecdote. I think it's worth knowing. Once, I think Rabbi Yitzchak Verker, which was a big Oyev Yisrael, tremendous Oyev Yisrael, he's the grandfather of the Amshinover dynasty. That if you know the Amshinover in Beit Vegan, or his grandfather, they're unbelievable Oyev Yisrael, beautiful people. So Rabbi Yitzchak asked his friend Reb Mendel, why are you closing the door? Why are you closing the door? Why don't you want to talk to people? So he told him, I'll tell you a story, you'll understand. And he told me, it's obviously, it's one of these like Breslover parables. Like he says, once upon a time, there was this magical animal, like a reindeer in the forest, which had these unbelievable antlers, which were so special that they touched heaven and earth. They mamish touched the stars. They were unbelievable antlers, you know what I mean? And this magical reindeer was running in the forest and constantly touching the stars, constantly touching the heavenly bodies. One day, a poor little Yiddler walks into the forest and he's sad terribly. What happened? Socially, I don't know if you still remember this. I still remember this in the old Chicago. People came to Shiur with a snuff box. They used to give out snuff, tobacco. These old people back on the southwest side, you know what I mean? On Karlov, on Pulaski, Independence Boulevard. Aaron would know where that is. Okay, you know what I mean? They would come with the Shiur with snuff. You sometimes see it on Yom Kippur, they come around with snuff, but this was normal. That's all these people had like yellow mustaches, but they were smelling snuff. Snuff is tobacco. But it was very special to have a silver snuff box. This was a big deal to have a silver snuff box. So this poor guy lost his box. So obviously he lost his social standing. You can't go to Shiur without your silver estrich box. Well, in those days you couldn't go to Shiur without your silver snuff box. What's he do? He's never distraught, and he goes into the forest. And this beautiful reindeer sees him, says, "Rebbe, what's your problem?" Says, "I'll tell the honest truth. How can I go to Shiur? I lost my snuff box." So says, "What's your problem? Climb up my tail." Just as careful how I'm describing it. Jump on my back, climb up my neck, jump on my head, and climb up to the top of the antlers and cut off a little piece. And that is mystical reindeer antlers that touch the stars, man. You have no idea what you're going to have. And they did that. He climbed up his tail, jumped on his back, climbed up his neck, jumped on his head, climbed up the antlers, and cut off a piece of the antlers. He came back to, he formed a snuff box out of it. He came to the Shiur, and everyone says, like, wow, like, where did you get this? This is like unbelievable. I said, well, there's a so nice little reindeer in the forest, and he allowed me to cut off a bit of his antlers, which touched the heavens and the skies and the stars. And this is this unbelievable material. So they all went to the forest, and they all climbed up his tail and jumped on his back and climbed on his neck and jumped on his head and clambered up to the antlers. They all cut off little pieces for their snuff boxes. So everyone was happy. They all had snuff boxes to exhibit and show, but the poor antlers, the reindeer's antlers didn't have enough length anymore to touch the skies and the stars. So the Kutzker says, that's why I closed the door. They're all using me for the snuff box. At the end of the day, I can't touch the stars anymore. So I closed the door. So this I want you to understand. This is an unbelievable story. Take it for where you want to take it. Use the people who somehow can touch things more in an appropriate way, and don't jump on their backs, and don't jump on their heads, don't climb on their necks, and don't cut off their antlers. Mamish, this is the story of the Holy Kutzker to remember. I hope this will, at least you remember this, okay? At least leave him some antlers. You cut off a little bit. Leave him some antlers. Apples, Dortons, you're able to grow, or at least make sure they're small enough they should be able to grow again. Something. Atkan. So what happens when he closed the door? So the poor young Hasidim had no one to teach him anymore. So his old friend, Mordechai Yosef, he wrote a book called Meha Shiloach, Mem Yud is Mordechai Yosef. He opened up a shtivel of his own, like a B'shol Alter. On Simchas Torah, he made a cupfus of his own. And then he started a whole new dynasty called Ishbitz, Radzin, and they didn't talk to each other afterwards. Well, the Hasidim didn't talk to each other afterwards because he rebelled. And this is the Ishbitz dynasty, if you really want to know. Okay? To give you a little historical background, plus the stuff back story. So the Me'er Shiloach, now the Me'er Shiloach was not written by the Me'er Shiloach. I don't know if anybody knows, the Me'er Shiloach was written by the notes written by a 16-year-old grandson, which afterwards became the Balat Chelis. The man was a genius of the genius of the geniuses. But that's why I say that no one can really understand the book unless you read the other writings of the school to understand, because there's nothing more than notes. A lot of doctorates written on the Me'er Shiloach. I don't know if you're aware of that. And the problem with them is because they're taking the Me'er Shiloach as a literal and not understanding those are notes of a 16-year-old. You have to see the broad context to understand the language. It's very important to remember this should you ever want to study the Me'er Shiloach. I spent years on it, so this you should know. So this is what he writes, the Me'er Shiloach. This Yaakov, which is the son of the Me'er Shiloach. He's the big explainer of the Me'er Shiloach. He explained the three eatings as follows. The soul, in order to want to stay in the body, constantly needs new experiences of Kavod Shamayim. Because in old experience, I have a great experience up in the heavens. Why would I want to be here? In order for it to exist or stay in the body. For without that, it just is not even thinkable. Something which is alive and infinite would somehow be connected to the finite material world. The only reason it keeps it there, because there it experiences a deeper understanding of infinity. So he says, what does it receive from the Lechem Haaretz? He always sees new things. What does he see? He sees that things would look devoid of godliness. He said, it's a strawberry milkshake, for goodness sakes. And he realized, no, that is also, that is God. And I can now take that energy and daven mincha or Meir, like I mentioned, raise the reasons of that existence and bring it into Avodas Hashem. I told you, it's like Livingston realizing that there's humanity with the pygmies in Zimbabwe. You suddenly realize things which the God B'chad Shemai is much more profound than what you ever thought about. So he says, when you bring these energies into your body, it gets incorporated in the body of man, and then you can serve God, standing up in front of God, panim b'panim. So this energy allows you to have a direct dialectic relationship with God. So it's unbelievable. That is why the neshama is willing to stay in the body. When it sees or knows that being in the body, he can extract precious realities or ideas from things which look devoid of them. This is where we stopped last time around. Because the pasuk says in Yirmiyahu that if you extract precious things from things which seem slummy, there it's talking about, if Rashi says, if you introduce Yiddishkeit to people that wouldn't know it, or you bring people to a more profound understanding of the Yiddishkeit, or a profounder kiyum of the mitzvahs, or limud Torah, it says, in totzia kamizorel kefitiyeh, whatever you will want that should happen will happen. If you want a bracha for somebody, go to someone which is really someone which brings people back to Yiddishkeit. Your Yirmiyahu Navi says he's a Rebbe. Whatever you want, you're a tzaddik geyser HaKadosh Baruch Hu Makayim. It's in Fush pasuk in Yirmiyahu. So it says here that the neshama realizes he's constantly taking animal energy, mineral energy, vegetation energy, translating it, transforming it into human energy, and taking that and putting out a pair of tefillin. So you just redeemed and elevated all that food chain all the energies into avodas Hashem panim b'panim. That's an unbelievable thing. That's motzi yakar mizolel. So when you think of it, you understand when it said that a person's table is a mizbeach. Understand that that's what's happening here. You're taking animal innards and you're making isharech nichayach laHashem. To the extent that this, the Gemara said that kiyam ha'olam is tali and tamid sheshachim and tamid shebein ha'arbayim. The tamid which is parallel bisman hazeh the Medrash is saying morning and evening. New and your shulchan, your breakfast is parallel to kriyas, the place of doing of that mizbeach of kiyam ha'olamis. Right, it is kiyam ha'olamis, but the reason of the olamis is the haitzi yakar mizolel, to elevate the mundane realities, to transform them into meaningful realities of connection between the finite and the infinite, equals you standing panim b'panim mul Hashem. Okay, let's go further. Well, the feet. Now here he goes, says something very important. Shekol olam hazeh hu ilana d'sfeika, shu murav tevera. When we look at this world, he describes it in the description found in Zerah Kaddish and Parshas Bereshis. The world is called Ilana Desfeka, the tree of doubt. Once upon a time, we had a tree of Toiv and Ra. Okay, it was clear. There was Toiv, there was Ra, there was Emes, there was Sheker. Today, after Adam or Eve partook of that Eitz Hadas, prior to having the Eitz Chaim on that early Friday noontime, everything got mixed up. There's nothing accurate or perfect today. Everything is missing something. We don't have clarity. Even none of our actions are pure because we are plagued with subjectivity. And by definition, if we're plagued with subjectivity, we end up doing things not because what they are, but because we feel good about them. And so on. Reb Chaim Volozhin explains that the pshat in the pasuk, Ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher yaseh tov v'lo yechteh. Literal translation sounds, there's no righteous man on earth which does good but does not sin. He says that's not what it means. The chatot means is lashon choser. It's void. It's missing. The pasuk is when you want to cleanse the house from tumah. The pasuk says by tumah sras v'chita es habayis. He cleanses, disinfects the house. Chatos means there is something missing. V'chita, emptying it out of tumah or bringing it in tumah. Something's missing. He says, Ein tzaddik, by the greatest man doesn't do anything which is perfect. Everything by everybody is missing something. Why? Because this is the existence. It's a beautiful thing to know. Young people somehow strive for perfection. I just had a guy today, for example, sitting by this table here in yeshiva, discussing certain failures. And I looked at him and said, so what do you want? That means you're a human being. Failure is part of who we are. God doesn't expect perfection. That's exactly what that pasuk says. There's nobody that's perfect. Everything is gray area. Everything, you're missing something. There's no pure, we don't know anybody. I don't know anybody. According to Shlomo Melech, there is no anybody that is purely altruistic, doing things totally only because it's the will of God. You always have things makes you feel good, makes you it's norm, it's social. You can give a million. I want but I don't know. You give a million reasons. No one is doing it because it's the right thing to do alone. You always have a little bit. It's right, but it's also good. Okay, we have the psychological necessity to feel connected to it. That it somehow gives us something, not just I'm doing it because I have to. In other words, although the Gemara says mitzvot lav lehen no mitnu, mitzvahs are not there for any sense of pleasure or accomplishment. They're literally there, as Rashi says, oil as a yoke, an obligation. No sense of you have, you get nothing. You do it because you're a slave, and that's what the master wants. No questions asked. But no one, everybody knows that there's no one in this world. Maybe there is. I don't know them. If he's going to Shlomo Melech, there's no one in this world which does it totally out of pure religious altruism. Everybody is somehow involved in his mitzvahs or limud because of a certain sense of pleasure or accomplishment or good feeling or whatever it only be. There's always the I there too. That's called choteh, missing. That's why this world is called Ilana Desfeita. It's the world of doubt. It's gray. It's not, there are different shades of that gray, but it's gray. Everything is gray. There's no definite yes versus no. There's no perfection. We are not looking at the extremes of right or wrong anymore. We live heavily in a world of, is it good for me or bad for me too? That is included. You may strive for right and wrong, but that part, you may there's at least some minute sense of, I want it right because I feel good about it, or something like that. So that's called chait. That's called chisar. So this is the Ilana Desveita. So he says this world is in the Lord of the tree of Suffolk, as opposed to the Eitz Hadas, Toiv Vera, Eitz Hachayim. Today, after he partook of that tree, so to speak, it is now we have the tree of doubt. Okay, Reb Chaim Volosher elaborates on this. It's really worth seeing. Shehumu Rav Toiv Vera is a mixture of good and bad. That's the way it always is. Okay, V'lachein, therefore, for example, Kol Machal. מוציא האדם המובחר וחלק הטוב שבו, מה שראוי להתקרב בצורת אדם, לעבוד בכוח האכילה ואת השם, ונדחה ממנו הפסולת, etc. מה שאינו ראוי להתקרב בצורת האדם. It's not just in the in your attachment to things. The whole world, whole of existence is a mixture of teichen and psoilus. And our job is constantly to find out what is the teichen, what is the psoilus. There is nothing which is pure. Therefore, take food. The food is there. We understand that the purpose of food is primarily not just to nurture the body, but more so that the soul should want to stay in the body. Yet, not all. How does it stay in the body? Because the food is incorporated in the body of man, energizing him. But yet, there are major elements of food which are not incorporated in man. They process through the body of man, but they're toxic waste. Which means this is part of food of the world we are in today, where it cannot be redeemed. So there's a part of this Olam Haza, which if the whole idea of food is here, you are elevating the food chain or the energy chain, which came from Doimem to Somech, the Chai, to Medaber. Well, there's a certain part which isn't happening. The best what happens is it becomes a certain waste material which can be used as fertilizer, should you choose, in an agrarian society. That may be important. But outside of that, it's really, you're not using that. So there is X amount of food there, which does not justify the soul staying in the body. So the only reason for the soul staying in the body is not for that aspect of the food, which actually is expelled because it's toxic waste. It's even dangerous to stay in the body. Rather, only that part of the food, the nutrition of the food. Very important to understand. The nutrition of the food, those aspects of the food which are nutritious and therefore empower you to do X amount of positive activities. That's the reason that the Yohitzi Yakar Mizolel. Okay, you're doing kiruv. You're taking out the important part, the nutrition, from a bunch of husks. There's a lot of stuff there which does not come in. So you say that is true by the lechem of matzah. Matzah, yes, it's true. You're eating matzah, but matzah. Why do you want matzah? You want the matzah because the reason you eat matzah is because it's part of this world, and this world is a mess. So there's going to be, not all of this world can be elevated. One has to understand that. It doesn't mean that God did not will its existence. God wills its existence, but you do not have the keys to elevate it. You didn't get the keys to how to transform that, and that's why it's called Asur. The Rebbe explains in Tanya that Asur doesn't mean forbidden. Asur means tied up. It is so tied up that you don't have it's an Gordian knot. You don't have the capabilities of untying that knot and elevating it. And since you can't elevate it, that's why you're not permitted to eat it. The only heter we have to partake in Olam Hazeh is because we are taking Olam Hazeh and transforming it into an Olam Haba. We're transforming it into something much more important. We're elevating it. If you don't elevate, in reality, you really should know right to use it. That's why the Rebbe writes in Tanya that if a person eats things just for taiva, even if it's mutter, he needs shuva and kapora, and there's kafakela. The Rebbe writes just in the beginning of Tanya that even partaking of Olam Hazeh, any pleasure without any justification of elevating it, you literally nenem Olam Hazeh b'lei bracha. That's what he said. I'm using the metaphor, but it means even without that, any usage of Olam Hazeh which does not transform into a positive activity, was prohibited. It's prohibited. It's not feira, but you need tshuva. You literally need tshuva, and there's an English called kafakela to purify you from that. The Rebbe writes this literally. Where is it? In the third paragraph. That's where it said yes, because that's usher. Usher means it's tied up, and you don't have the tools to redeem it. If you don't have the tools to redeem it, don't partake of it. What happens if you have the tools and you didn't redeem it? Well, you shouldn't have partaken with it either. That's what it says. It's a very important nakuda. We're talking about Gashmis. This is what he writes. So he said this is all true by lechem in the or. So this happened in the lechem, the chametz, and also in the matzah. Aval, the lechem in Hashemayim. Here we found a very interesting Gemara in Yuma. The Rashi brings it down. The Gemara is in Yuma that it did not have toxic waste. It was nivla be'ivorim. All of it was pure nutrition, and all of it was used. There was nothing to, excuse the expression, defecate. There was nothing there. It all was pure nutrition. Equals nothing was chitzonius. Nothing was zoleh. Nothing was devoid of kedusha. Everything was usable. You use it all. That's why it says it had no waste material. They didn't have to exercise bodily activities of expelling their waste. Why? So what does Shemayim mean? Here he explains. We talk about Shemayim. Remember, we learned the Zohar. It says Lechem Shemayim, Shemayim Mamash. Why is it called Shemayim? So he says Shemayim Moreh al Bihirut Atzum. Again, when we look at a physical phenomenon, we must understand it's an external metaphoric expression of a deeper concept. When you look at, I say this is crystal clear as the day. You know what I mean? B'tas Hashem ka'ayom hazeh. What does ka'ayom hazeh mean? I don't want to ask. I'll tell you. Two possibilities bound in the Pirusha. One, that the name that you had in the past is still resonating in the present. That is a maybe. B'tas Hashem ka'ayom hazeh. It's not resonating. And ask how many people they know about the Ness of Hanukkah. Yet we say B'tas Hashem ka'ayom hazeh. A bit hard to think that means that. The other possibility, Rashi brings it down. Just I look at the day, it's clear as it's day. Also, this was a very clear understanding of God. We need to be heroes with the clarity like Kayam Hazeh. So the idea behind this, I look at the sky, I see clarity. Okay, that's what Chazal understood in the language of Kayam Hazeh. You're looking at the sky, you see clarity, and a nice clear sky, it's beautiful. So he says Shemayim, when it says Shemayim means clarity. It's a metaphor for clarity. Ki Shemayim moral beirut atzum. Very, very unbelievable clarity. What kind of clarity? Shisham uvurar, shashemi barachla boreva manhig. You realize it's as clear as day that there's nothing which is not an expression of God's will. And therefore, if you realize that everything is expression of God's will and whim, all of God's will and whim, but there's no silence because everything is Ratzon Hashem. That realization that everything is Ratzon Hashem is alone a steer to being silence. Silence, by definition, means something which cannot be redeemed. You can't use it. It doesn't help you understand you go into St. Peter's Basilica, you don't actually have how the sense of aesthetics there is going to help you in Avodah Satfila. Adrab, it's Asur Ba'anoah. So this is what he says. So this is true. If what you take, what you experience is something which is out of a sense of reality, that there's nothing which isn't Ritzayin HaKadosh Baruch Hu, well, obviously at that stage there's no silence. But then there's something stronger. Omnam, after lechem in Hashemayim, even by the man, Hagam Shashefu Birut Atzum, what you received was from a matter which had strong clarity. You had clear understanding. This is a bitui of Chochmah Sefer V'Tzaina. You look at this, you say, this is an expression. I look at a Picasso or at a Dali. I don't have to say, oh, yeah, this is a Dali. Okay, this is a Rodin. Today I was discussing in class, some boy was sitting like this. I says, I hope you look like you're a Don Stinker. If you know what that is, it's a famous bronze statue. So the problem, they didn't even know what that is, which is really very funny. Illiterates of high schools today. But this is the idea. The idea is you look at this, you see these things. If you're an informed person, you see certain things. You're not an informed person, you don't see anything. So this is what he says. When you have this idea, but you see that everything is chokhmah v'ritzon. That's what you see. Okay. So this is what he says. In that case, there is no psilus, but there is something which does have, it is an issue. What's the issue? Because at the end of the day, what makes you want to eat that bread? It's because the body yearns for food. So he says, the Kabbalah derech haguf. It's only through engaging in my body will I see godliness. Remember his usage of the word. If you plan to be an ascetic, well, you're not going to totally see the total picture of godliness. Dafka, if you live a normal life, you will see in your life, in your daily life, there you will see aspects of a Kadosh Baruch Hu which are beyond the vision of just an ascetic, of someone living in the Midbarios. He may be pure, but you're going to be richer. A very big nafkamin. I'm not going into Midbarios, I'm not going into different realities, but I am sure that the person who sees Chochmas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not just in a Taisuf, but also in a medical journal, or etc., he sees a more colorful, richer understanding of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It may not be as pure because he has more challenges than if he was just sitting by a Taisuf, but if he sees it in that medical journal, well, he's seeing a richer reality. And this is what is said over here. That's why the Rambam writes that Rabbeinu asked God that he should give him knowledge of all the disciplines of science. He needs a PhD in all the sciences to understand God. He wanted to have not a myopic understanding of God, but a broad understanding of godliness. So this is what it says here. So Kami says, but because this is something which comes through the body, it comes to the body yearns for food. It is something which is not purely spiritual. It is a spiritual reality which is drawn through the body, through bodily experiences. Therefore, well, what is the body? As far as we're concerned, God created a soul with a capability of choice. Equals he's in a body. The koyach habchira lies in the fact that he put an neshama into a guf. The neshama without the guf doesn't have a bchira, and the neshama in the guf has bchira. So what's going to happen with the man? At least you're going to get koyach habchira. You will nurture not the taivus of the world. You won't have psilus, but it's going to nurture the guf to the extent of koyach habchira, because that is really, when we want to explain theologically, what happens when the neshama goes into the body? Koyach habchira. That's what it is. So this is what he writes. So he writes that when you put the man into the body, what can you do with the koyach habchira? You can now swerve what you receive to wherever you want. Hey, the Oichle Aman sinned. The 8 man, Lechman Hashemayim, and yet they had quite a few issues there. The Baal Pa'or was also Lechman Hashemayim. Okay, the people who ate the man said they were sick of it. Remember, kivrei sataiva, etc. Misainanim. So they did have it gave them here, and they were capable of saying very nice, very beautiful, but I want something else. So I want this energy that you're giving me allowed me to take. I don't want this. I want something else. Where did they get the koyach habchira from? From eating the man. Because if you really, the answer is because if you really would take it in a pure way, there wouldn't be pure. Why do we have pure? You have free will because there's an I-thou relationship. There's you and there's a God. You realize you mamish understand God is unbelievable, everything is godliness, but the I is independent. Psychologically, if you would actually nullify your I, you'd be a mess. You'd be a terrible mess. Okay? The reality is one cannot nullify the I. Okay, one can, but you'll be committed. Okay? The idea is to nullify the I is a terrible thing, right? So I have an I there. As long as it's in me versus a you. So by nature, at the end of the day, I now have the capability of saying, well, if that's the case, I want it in one way or the other. I will decide to do this because it is the right thing, but it's my decision. I have the capability of not doing it. I've decided to do it. So who's doing it? I is doing it. It's all true. You know, like you have a Shiur in front of you, and you start arguing with Rav Shimon. What would happen if Rav Shimon would be in front of you? Or you're arguing with Rav Chaim, okay? It's all nice when you have a Chedush of Chaim Alevi in front of you and he's dead. You have his knowledge. If he's in front of you, you're scared. Because as soon as you open your mouth, he'll close it for you. You realize, all of a sudden, your eye not just shrunk, diminished, deleted, finito. Now you're nothing more than a clay keyboard. When he opens his mouth, you open your ears. Your mouth doesn't exist. Okay? When does it exist? When he's not there anymore. That's a cloud gadol b'Torah. So when you stand in front of greatness, when you say you really what it is, you're totally diminished. You have a sense of self, but it's put on the shelf for some other times. So what he says is something very special. He says, even the man min hashamayim, in which you live with behirus, but that behirus and everything is ma'aseh kadosh baruch hu, does not negate the sense of self. And therefore you have a capability of bchira. And once you have the capability of bchira, you can take it to the wrong place. But there is one way of nourishing the soul which totally negates the sense of self. And here I'll explain it in English, and then we'll see it in Hebrew. And that is, you know, in the search for understanding, for example, a Tosfos, there's two ways of doing it. There is basically, you have a sense of self, which you feel, I understand certain things, I will draw constructs. Does this Tosfos fit into the constructs that I have? So who's the centerpiece of that reality? You drew several possibilities that you perceive, and you figure, well, according to this possibility, the Tosfos make sense to you. So who's the centerpiece of that dialogue? You. You drew up the constructs that you understand, and you now put the Tosfos in the box that you put it in. Now you're happy. That is not intellectual honesty. Intellectual honesty demands a total annihilation of the self in front of the source, trying to understand what the source really means, not what you want to see in it. That's why the Rebbe writes, what is Chochmah? Chochmah comes from two words, koyach, ma. The strength of what ma. What does ma mean? Two things, inquisitiveness, what? Also ma, ba'anachnu ma. What are nothing. I have no agendas here. Whatever the text says is what it's going to say, whether I like it or not, whether I understand it or not. And the classical example would be actually last week's parsha, the Akedah. In the Akedah, if we recall, we learn Rambam writes explicitly that except for Moshe Rabbeinu, all the prophets did not hear distinct sentences. They experienced a metaphor, a rhyme or a riddle, and subconsciously, somewhere in their psyche, lie the solution or the interpretation of that rhyme or riddle. They had to look within themselves through the medium of prophecy, which I really don't know what it is, and find, through intellectual honesty, what exactly is that solution that's found within their psyche to interpret this rhyme and riddle. And so the Rambam says that sometimes the Navi will only mention the solution, sometimes they'll mention only the rhyme and riddle, sometimes they'll mention both. For example, the ladder of Jacob doesn't mention the solution. They only saw the rhyme and riddle. What is the solution? He brings Chazal, telling Jewish history, whatever it be, and so on and so forth. So let's understand one thing. Avraham Avinu did not hear the words he did not hear those words. He saw some kind of a metaphor and had to look within himself with all total intellectual honesty and the kayach and the discipline of nevuah, which once again I don't know what it is, and find the solution there. Now, let's be very honest. He is a good prophet. He finds the solution. What does he say to himself? It can't be. God promised me, he promised me, and goyim, etc. And all of a sudden, at the age of 36, I was about to slaughter. That means this is what the text says. So So naturally, he'll say, although this is what the text sounds like, I am not comfortable with it, and I will therefore read it a different way, which is what we do constantly. For example, God Himself says to Avram Avinu, if you saw Rashi at the end of the parsha, you didn't have to translate "Ba'aleyu la'oila" to slaughter him. I didn't tell you to slaughter him. Shachteyu. I at least told you to bind him, but I didn't tell you to slaughter him. Now, he's as I lamdin in Avram Avinu is also. Why didn't he translate it that way? So the Meir Shilach says that exactly was his test. His test was intellectual honesty. Are you capable of negating any sense of self in front of what is the explicit words of God? You understand, the prophecy tells you this is what the solution is, but it makes no sense to who? To you. You don't count. Bow down. How God will do this is none of your business. This is what He says. So a prophet is not supposed to inject his private world into the interpretation of the prophecy. He must stand in front of the text. This is what it says. But I'm not comfortable with it. Okay, I'm not comfortable with a lot of things, but this is what it says. If we would learn Gemara that way, we would be better people. Instead of that, what do? We inject our preconceived notions, which make us comfortable, into them. Like we pick up a Hefza and Gabra, we say this is X and this is Y, and everything's in nice surgical boxes, which is all shtiyut. Is that what the text says? Or are you like adding an elephant into a hole of a needle over here? You know what I mean? What are you doing? Okay. So this is called intellectual honesty. That intellectual honesty is negation of the self in a certain way. That means you don't feel. It means you negate. You don't have an agenda. You're here, but as a servant. You're here as a recipient. You're not here as an active participant of telling me what I mean. Okay, you don't tell the Rajba what he means unless you understand how the Rajba thinks. You don't know the Rajba enough. Keep your mouth shut. You don't explain the Rambam through terms which he never heard about and a way of thinking which is foreign to him. That's not Rambam. That's you using Rambam for self-gratification. That is not intellectual honesty. Therefore, Chachma is Vanachnu Ma. It is a negation of the self. You stand with no agenda in front of a text, and you say, what does the text say? That's the Koyach of Chachma. You literally have negated your active self. You're there in the passive form. You're there as a being. You're not there as a maker and shaker. Okay? So that's what he writes. He writes when a person lives with Chachma in front of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, he no more even thinks or asks questions about history. This is what God wants. This is the right thing. What is it? I don't know. He's not going to say, well, God was angry, God did this. He's not going to give apologetics for God. He has no necessity to give apologetics for God. Even those things which sound terrible, okay, that's what he did. How, why, I don't know. But he has no problem with I don't know. And that's why it says that Yaakov Avinu attained that level. And because of that, Yaakov Avinu walks into his father wearing goat skins, which have a terrible smell. And yet the Medrash Yaakov Yitzchak Avinu says, wow, my son smells like Gan Eden. Rashi writes that. Why? What does this mean? So the Rebbe here explains the mitzvah says Yaakov Avinu was the Ish Das. What does that mean? Well, we know that Yaakov Avinu is the meter of Tiferes. Tiferes means beauty. As we explained in different classes, it is the harmonious merging of different, even opposing elements into one. Well, the Zohar Kodesh writes that the pneumius of Tiferes is Das. It says, Yaakov milabar, Moshe milagav. The external expression of the Das of Moshe is Yaakov Avinu. Tiferes, the capability of merging in a harmonious way all different elements which don't seem to fit, and yet they do make a beautiful one picture. That is Dr. the meat of Das. You're a man of high intellect and understanding. In the world of thought, many opposing ideas become one. It's quite simple and it's pashut. Anybody who's lived in a world of thought or dealt with the arts. Okay, there you have it. So this is what it says. So when it says that the people that live in Chachma, which Chachma does he mean? It means the Chachma of understanding, Rashis Chachma Yiras Hashem, understanding God. Yes, it's not the people just sitting and learning Gemara. If he learns the Gemara, that enhances understanding of God, and he has a more deeper, profounder God awareness. He, Eina Chanami, he is perceiving something which is unbelievable. There's no chishon in it at all, and that's called the mazon of the Talmidei Chachamim. So those are different nourishments of the soul, whether it's regular bread, whether it's matzah, and we'll explain in 2 minutes now what that means, or whether it's min hashamayim, man, or finally the ultimate reason for the soul staying in the body, because there's no psalus at all. You purely understand that everything, it's the right thing to do. Why it's right, you're not even asking. It's the right thing to do. Okay. Now it's a really hard thing to do, to walk on a heritage trip and look in those mound of shoes over there and say, well, this was the right thing to do. Even say it's the right thing to do is a very hard thing to say. Yet the Jew is obliged to say it. He's obliged to say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam dayan ha'emes. It was the right thing to do. You're not supposed to say you feel good about it. You actually feel atrocious. But you have to, the religious person has to say, looking at that mound of shoes or glasses, whatever you choose, the different mounds there in Auschwitz, piles, you're going to say, dayan ha'emes. That was the right thing to do. Which is not easy. That is an act of negation of the self. I mean, it's a real profound act of religion. This is the rechush of the people who live in a chokhmah techaya es ba'aleha. They live a world in which they don't know whether it's good or bad, but they don't care. They know one thing, it's the right thing to do. Okay, it's a different world. That's another mizah. So the soul will stay in the body just to encounter such things. You may not be eating. The soul will stay in the body to encounter the fact that this crazy, turbulent world, it's all the right thing to do. You understand this covered shemayim in everything, literally. That's a big proud thing. Now I'm going back, in light of all this, to the Derech Mitzvah Secha, page 398. And this is where he starts saying, there's things that we learn, so I'm going to basically skip. He brings the pasuk, Haben Yakili Ephraim, my beloved child Ephraim, which is Klal Yisrael. Kimidi dabri boy zachas tireno alkein hamu me'ai loy. My stomach churns, and we explained at length that yes, there's a celestial stomach. We explained what that meant. What does the stomach do? The stomach basically is you have all the different tools in which it cuts. It's mevara the psilus ha'achol from the pnimius ha'achol, and there's the nutrition which goes to the different places. All your different digestive tools. Okay, and there's that which is expelled in toxic waste. It's the bevarer, it's the oichel minapsilis, it's that which can be miskalo b'grusa adam, that which cannot be miskalo b'grusa adam, and it sends everything to the right place. You need vitamin B in this organ, it gets there. You need vitamin C in this organ, it gets there. You need vitamin E in this organ, it gets there. The proteins go where they have to go, the carbs go where they have to go. The same thing applies also in God's relationship with the world. What we do, what keeps, just as our soul stays here because of Kavod Shemayim, right? What is God? God also is perceived through the prophet as a man sitting on the chair of monarchy. Adam Yoshev al Kisei. The pasuk in Yecheskel by the Merkava. Kidmut Adam Yoshev al Kisei. Now your question has to be, that Adam, what is it? Adam is a metaphor. He saw some kind of a figure. Now, that's not God. God doesn't have a figure. So what did he see? If you understand the Merkava, read it a little bit with the Malbim, he saw and realized the dynamics of God's interaction with creation. He saw the right hand, which means the midah of chesed. He saw the left hand, the midah of pur, and so on and so forth. He saw the total dynamic, the God of interaction with the world. That's not God in essence. God in essence is infinite. It is infinity expressed in this celestial body of interaction. It's like me at the moment. Whether you know me or not is irrelevant. Most people don't know me personally in the deepest way. You know me as a friend, you may know me as a teacher, but there's a me there which has nothing to do with anybody. Just me, maybe my wife. Thank God, anybody who lives in the public light understands he has to be very, very fanatic about keeping his Rishus HaYachid intact. Doesn't present it to the rabbin, not at all. Okay, but it's that Rishus HaYachid which is expressed in the rabbin. It's what you call it's your personal, private persona, which is given expression through your public persona. But the public persona is not you. It's how the private persona expresses itself outside. That's what it really is. What are you? Well, that you and maybe your wife knows. Okay, that's you. Okay, you with your chesroinus, with your milas, whatever colorful you there's there. Most of it is not expressed in the street. Most of it is not known to your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues, your students, your teachers. I don't know what. That's you. Now, some people the wives don't even know who they are. That's a problem. But at least, it's not a problem because after X amount of years, I'm hitting its 50th year now. Yeah, you chap who the you is, but it did take a good 50 years to chap who it is. So don't give up. You have a long time to go. But let me tell you guys, you got to keep on courting them until you die. It's like unbelievable. You thought you were finished with the dating. No way. You date them until the end. Get used to it. Here, Rosenbaum, you're a young little boy. Remember, if you date them, Adzi Bula Basraisa. Okay, you got that straight, Florida boy. Okay, you have to understand, this is the way the game is. They don't know you, you don't know them, you got to figure it out. It's a long time, and it's pretty rough. I don't care what they tell you at the Shema Brachas. It's a rough ride, and you just keep on going there, and you see at the end, it's the nicest thing that ever happened to people. It's the best thing I did in my life. I couldn't be anything better than this. Okay, this is like it. Shirish Kol Tov. You understand? Yeah, but it's like riding rodeo, man. Until finally you're not thrown out of the saddle. Okay? So at the end of the day, there's God and there's God of external expression. Granted. So what you really know about a Kadosh Baruch Hu is you know the God of external expression. Do you know God himself, so to speak? No, you don't know it. You only know God of internal expression. So now so if I would do a metaphor, I would say the body, what Yechezkel saw is God's interaction with the world. But what makes that alive and kicking and doing? Because there's God of infinity expressed in that God. So I would call the God in essence the neshama of the body, which is the God of interaction. The God of interaction, the interactive aspect of God functions because there's the God in essence which expresses himself in that body of interaction. So just like you understand there's an Adam ala Kisei, there's also Nishmas Adam ala Kisei. What's the neshama of the Adam ala Kisei? Atzmius Ein Sof Baruch Hu, God himself. God in essence is your soul is expressed itself in your body. God, which is your essence, your primary identity is your neshama. It's expressed in your bodily body. Here too, it is God of essence, which is expressed in the body, the corpus of God, literally, which means say the interactive capability of God. It's me, of my Rishus HaYachid, which is expressed in me as teacher, which is my Rishus HaRabim. The Rishus HaRabim is nothing more than an external facade. It's a suit. And the I is expressing itself that way. So I look at God of Chesed, word fast, that's the suit, man. That's the interactive God. Who is interacting? God is interacting in that mode of behavior. So there's also the neshama of the goof of Adam ala Kisei in the Adam ala Kisei. Now, why do you think we understand that whatever we look in this world, as I taught you before, is nothing more than a reflection of God and his interaction with the world. So if my neshama fidgets and doesn't want to be here, why would infinity want to be constantly in interaction with creation unless there's a reason for it? And what's the reason for it? What was the reason for creation? The reason for creation is the Medrash Reis in Parashat Shmini. God wanted to, and the Ramban discussed in Parashat Bay, because God wanted to create low levels of consciousness, which people will rise from and realize they are nothing more than a created form and live by that credo. Living that I'm nothing more than a bria of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's called Kavod Shemayim. Kavod Shemayim means I live constantly with the understanding I am nothing more than a bria of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the game is his. I'm nothing more than a pawn or a rook or a bishop on his chessboard. That's the purpose of creation. That's Kavod Shamayim. So what keeps God wanting to make the world? Because constantly he realized that the world is giving Kavod Shamayim. Every act that we do of Torah and mitzvahs in the proper way is the reason that God stays in this world. So the mazayin of the nishmas ha'adam alakisei, to keep it tied to the adam alakisei, is the Torah and mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim that we do, which basically are for the purpose and are marbe kavod shamayim. That's key number one, and that's what he writes. Now you must understand. So if that's the case, what is the stomach of God? We say again that there's a stomach. What does it mean? He takes your ma'asim tovim, and there's your ma'asim tovim which are level A, which are good for giving, activating this hashpah in the world. Just like vitamin E is needed for eyes. This will bring more chokhmah in the world. There's certain ma'asim tovim which will bring more bina in the world. There's certain ma'asim tovim which will bring more chesed in the world, okay? They activate different aspects of the Adam Sha'al HaKiseh. Granted, very nice. And there's also things which somehow don't justify God wanting to be there because your actions are not perfect. It's Ilana Desfeta, remember? Nothing is perfect. So even your mitzvah is not all of this perfect. And what does that do? That's toxic waste in the body of Adam Alakise, and it's expelled. Now, what does it mean? That it's incorporated in the Adam Alakise, and yet it's just expelled. It means to say what happens is this is the source of that reality, which is not the purpose of thing. It is process in creation. It's a created form. It's not really something which justifies God wanting to be in this world. It's like the defecation of God. It's the psilus of the oichel of the celestial stomach. That's what it is. It's the psilus of the oichel of the celestial stomach. I'm going to read a little piece here, and then you copies. I'm going to read this. Is on page Reish. It's the last page of this whole thing. The idea of waste is the externalities of the gift that God gives. It comes down to realize themselves in the externalities of the world that we live in. I'm not going to explain that. What is the ultimate pneumius of everything? The capability of energies which never bring Torah and mitzvahs, etc. What is the chitzonius ha'olamus? Yeah, it means that nurtures the God. It is the externalities of God. Yes, God also creates a world which is full of externalities. What we call klippos, what we call husks. Parva. It's just the world the way it is. There's cars, clothes, jewelry, etc. That also comes from the body of God. But that's actually nothing more than a means and not an end. And when it doesn't really attain an end, it's just an external shard. So the psilus of a Kadosh Baruch Hu is the gashmius of the world the way it is. What should you looking for? Do you want a world of pnimius or do you want a world of chitzonius? If you want a world of pnimius, then you must do your maisim and maisim with a kavanah pnimis. If you do your maisim without a kavanah pnimis, they are chitzonius. You will nurture, the externalities of this world. You'll make bigger skyscrapers in Abu Dhabi. You'll have new computers. You'll have a nicer model of the Lexus or whatever it be. Obviously, Vacheron will have a nicer watch. That you can do. But that's not meaningful. That's not the reason why God wants to stay creator. You're not justifying the Ratzon or Adam Alakise to stay on that Kiseh. You're not connecting the neshama of the Adam Alakise to the Adam Alakise. You're not feeding God. You're feeding the body, but not the reason of the soul in the body. It's like you eat food, which is that nutritious, you're feeding the body, but you're not feeding the soul. If you're eating chitzonius without after taking it kape mala, you're eating chitzonius, so you're feeding your body, you're not feeding your soul. You're the same thing. Mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim, which are chitzonius, you're feeding the body of Adam alakisei, but you're not feeding the melech that wants to be in that Adam, and therefore make the word. You're not feeding kavod shemayim, because the only food he gets, the reason for him to continue creation is because of kavod shemayim. Okay, I'm going to stop here and just say at the end, that's what Baal Peor is. Baal Peor, as he explained, the pasuk said, it's a crazy pasuk. I don't know if you know this, it's in Yeshua Chav Beis, where the pasuk literally says that Yeshua, the Pinchas, which is a Pinchas said over there, and Baal Peor, Asher lo hitharnu mimenu. We have never been cleansed from Peor. Goodness sakes, we never met him again. This is towards the end of the days of Yeshua. What are we talking about? Lo yitarnu mimenu? Yes, Yeshua, Pinchas says of this in Yeshua Chav Beis pasuk Yitzayin, that till today we haven't been cleansed of Baal Peor. Because Peor means what? You served the deity by defecating. What you were doing, you were saying, I'd like to have more defecation of God. I want a God, I need a God which should give me chitzonius. I want a God that should give me bane, chayim, mezonah, revicha, all the external brachas. I want a great life. Do you also want a God of subjugation to his oneness and therefore annihilation of the self and therefore constricting your thoughts and feelings and actions? No. I want that God. I want the nice God which gives me, all the goodies. Like the guy that everyone says, yeah, Shon the type of the customers and chassim, Parnasa, make sure you say the tefillah for Parnasa by Tkiyas, make sure you say God, brother dear, I got a kind of deal. I need cash. I need sugar daddy. Whatever that means, I'm taking the full cultural context. I want a celestial sugar daddy. I will pleasure him with Torah mitzvahs, but I want whatever sugar daddy can supply. Look up sugar daddy in your Wikipedia. Okay, that's what I want. That's paganism. I want a guy which will give me the externalities. I want a rabbi which will teach me things which will make me feel good, and I have a good word to say at the table, and I'll feel very comfortable with my religion. I do not want a teacher or a rabbi which will challenge me and therefore make me feel uncomfortable with myself because I'm not really religious enough, or that I'm synthetic and not real. Do me a favor. This is the rabbi which doesn't have tenure. Okay? That's the guy which is out of a job and ends up becoming an accountant. Okay? If you want to be a rabbi which will work, you got to be able to cater to the crowd, right? You don't drive the crowd crazy. No. Equals Baal Peor. Lo hitanu mimenu. We look for superficial gods and religion to preserve our comfort zone, because what we really want is a God which will supply. Look at all the tefillahs that people ask for. Do you notice? And sometimes it drives me nuts. Here you're sitting on Yom Kippur, and you're saying B'Sefer Chaim Bracha V'Shalom. You have the noose on your neck, right? Like your mamish, like you don't know whether you're a Beinoni or not. And this is the day you're literally totally v'oimed. I once heard from Chaim Shulevitz, once being Beinoni Tluim v'oimdim. On Rosh Hashanah, they put the noose on your neck, and they think for 10 days are they going to kick the chair down or not? Will you angry or not? Totally v'oimed. You're hung. So he says, okay, here you have my noose on my neck. Not sure whether it's going to kick the chair away and I'm going to swing or not. And what do I say at davening at Kol Nidra night? To say for Chaim, Bracha V'Shalom, U'Parnasa Toifa, give a little geld. Why don't you vomit when you say that? You're about to swing, man. You're Anne Boleyn before she's getting her head chopped off, okay? So now, by the way, I'd like to have a nice supper. I mean, brother, dear, what are you talking about? You're going to swing. That's how we are. That has to be explained, okay? I'm not explaining it now. I remember when I was Avo, I was shocked by that, and I literally, Milish Vanessa walked out and started thinking. It took me half an hour to reconcile this. But this is the big issue on the table. We want the God of Parnasa type. Let's be honest. bunch of pagans, it's Balpor Shalit Arnu Mimenu. Don't you understand? First and foremost, you need the God of which you are subjugated to, and the I doesn't exist. It's what you say. What you say, boy. Yes, master. Yes, master. What you say, master. That's number one. Okay. Weiter, we'll talk about. So this is basically summing it up. Yes, the core of paganism is the quest for materialism. Materialism given by God. I'm very from a Jew. Yeah. But I want, as the Rebbe promised me, if I do this, I'll get Bonne, Chayim, Mezoiner, Reviche. Oh, Baruch Hashem, I'll have children, I'll have a happy life, and a lot of good parnasa. Mezoiner, Reviche means my portfolio will go up with 300%. Oh, for that, I'm going to vote Gimel. I know here in Eretz Yisrael, the Rebbe said that if you vote Gimel, you're going to get Bonne, Chayim, Mezoiner, Reviche. What can I tell you? I decided not to invest in it. Okay? Because I think that's Balpor. That is Balpor. Tell me it's the right thing to do. Tell me this is the right, etc. Don't tell me do it because God is your sugar daddy. I don't want the sugar daddy. It's nice to have him. Okay? But that's not why I'm there. Have a great evening. 2 weeks from now, we start a new topic. Finish with this. Okay, Daniel, we'll see you tomorrow, Daniel, right?
Bezrat Hashem.
Okay, we'll discuss what the next topic will be. Bye. It's
Thanks, Rabbi.
I think it's by me it's 8:16. Have a great morning, evening, afternoon. Bye. Call to Howard. Enjoy the dinner. Bye. Call to.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Give me regards to Tzvi.
Okay.
Bye.
See.
Thank you.